Hey everyone, and welcome to Fast Talk, your source for the science of endurance performance. I'm your host, Chris Case, here with Coach Trevor Connor and our guest, Angelo Poli. There are a lot of opinions on how to best build an effective training plan, but there's one approach that we can all agree doesn't work. If you never plan and simply wait until the moment you feel like working out to grab whatever equipment is available to do whatever training that time and gear allows, then there's a good shot you'll never get in a productive week of training. But here's the thing. That's the approach many of us take with nutrition. We wait until the moment we're hungry to decide what we want. And when we discover we have nothing to make a salad, we walk to the pizza place around the corner. Then, at the end of the day, we track our calories with the hope that we didn't overeat. We all know that effective training means mapping out our plan for the week, scheduling out the time ahead so we know we'll have it, and making sure we have the equipment we need. In many ways, effective training is about time management more than anything else. Effective nutrition is no different. After working with over 20,000 nutrition clients, this is exactly what MetPro founder Angelo Poli has learned about coaching nutrition. He builds nutritional training plans the same way a good cycling coach builds workout plans and walks his athletes through the plan. Today, we talk with Poli about nutritional planning. He reveals many of the tricks he's learned to effectively train nutrition every day. He starts with metabolic profiling to figure out how to best feed the client. And then he talks with us, the clients, about how to plan out and efficiently prepare nutrition every day, how to approach the week, including having a baseline diet, and what sort of fueling modifications endurance athletes need to make. If you're someone who believes in the power of training plans and understands how to execute workouts every day, but constantly struggles with your nutrition, then listen on. This episode will help you turn your nutrition into training. So let's start planning your nutrition and let's make you fast.
Well, Angelo, welcome to the episode. Been looking forward to this because there's a little bit of a backstory here. When I was working at Velo News, I was asked to write an article reviewing your product, MetPro, and I used it for an entire summer. And I will tell you, I got down to my race weight. I was performing really well that summer, really enjoyed it. And I will say, I wrote a very positive review for Velo News and have always wanted to get you on the show ever since then.
Very kind of you to say, Trevor. Thank you. And I'm thrilled to be here with you gentlemen talking. We're going to have some fun today. This is fantastic.
Well, I'm sorry it's taken so long to finally reach out and get you on the show. But what I really liked about your product is there are so many nutrition products out there that just track calories. So it's kind of an after the fact. You eat what you eat through the day and then you track it. And at the end of the day, you go, oh, I overate or ate too much of this or I ate too much of that. And it's just really leads to athletes beating up on themselves. And that's not what you do. You don't actually track what the athlete is eating. You plan.
That's right. Yeah.
You have the athlete work on, here's what I'm going to eat through the week. Here's what I'm going to eat tomorrow. Here's what I'm going to eat Tuesday. And I really like that because athletes understand planning. We build training plans. We map out the week. Doing that with nutrition, I think, puts them in a much more positive space. But I wanted to throw that to you and ask your thoughts on the difference between planning versus just tracking calories.
So I used to give, I guess I still do, give regular seminars on behavioral modifications and the real world actions of what actually will create change for someone, what sticks and what doesn't. And what I'll sometimes do is I'll split the room into two and I'll say, okay, on this side of the room, pick a diet, any strategy, any science that has worked for you in the past. And I'll get people to raise their hand and they'll say, well, they've done this strategy or that, and here's what's been effective. I said, great. Now on the left side of the room, you can eat anything you want, whenever you want. One rule, you have to prepare it the day before. Which side of the room do you think is going to have a better outcome? And everybody chuckles because we all know it really is preparation is key. And in fact, if you were a fly on the wall for one of our initial onboarding coaching calls when we work with an athlete, what you would be hearing me say is I'm not grading you on outcomes in the first week, 10 days. I'm grading you on habits established. Because if we create habits, I can parlay that into massive outcomes, optimization. But we have to have the foundation first. So you are absolutely on the right wavelength there when you're saying that planning is critical versus just saying, oh, we're going to hit a calorie intake. Calories matter, of course. We got to talk numbers. We got to talk the science. I'm sure we'll dive into all that. But it all starts with a foundation. You have to have a game plan.
Yeah. And, that's one of the things that I saw when I was using your product. I spent time every morning sitting down and actually making my lunch and putting it in a container to bring to work and putting together my snacks. I'd actually kind of put together all the food for the day and bring it to work. It took a little bit of time, not that much. It was less than 10 minutes. But then I had the day planned out and ready. And I kind of enjoyed that. I don't know why I didn't keep that up.
Yeah.
Because I can't tell you how many times I'm sitting at work. I go down to make a salad and go, oh, I don't have lettuce. I don't have this. I don't have that. And hey, there's this really greasy pizza place about a block away. And then you go over there and go, well, that was awful.
So what we end up doing, Trevor, so I have had the privilege in my career of dieting about 20,000 people. So I've done this a time or two. Now, I'm saying that to just share the things that end up actually creating friction are not necessarily the things most people would guess when first embarking on a strategy of planning and preparing. Most people, it is not, contrary to popular belief, a matter of willpower. It is not a matter of, I can't be on a nutrition plan or a diet because I like chocolate too much. That's not a thing. I mean, that is a thing, but that's not the thing. The thing is time management. So if I were to scrape our CRM with literally hundreds and thousands of messages where client wrote to coach, hey, I'm struggling. I didn't follow my meal plan yesterday. You know what the next line would be? It wasn't, I was craving apple pie. The next line would be, I got busy and
Yep. ...
So what we do at MetPro, we just end up being a bunch of nerds that sit around preemptively figuring out how to come up with strategies that are going to enable someone to overcome that friction. So I joke when people say, what do you do for a living? I tell people, they say, are you a nutritionist? I say, no, I'm a time management specialist, because that's really what it boils down to, learning how to manage your time optimally.
And I think athletes can understand this, because if you plan out your week and say, I'm going to do an hour with intervals on Tuesday and I'm going to do a recovery ride on Wednesday, most of the time you figure out how to find that hour to do that ride. If you don't plan out your week at all, I hear athletes say this all the time, like, oh, I want to train. What'd you do the last 3 days? It's like, oh, work got busy and this happened and that happened, and I didn't train the last 3 days. If it's planned, you tend to find the time for it. If you don't have a plan, days go by and you realize, I didn't even get on my bike. I didn't go out for a run.
Yep. We talk a lot with our, not just athletes, but anyone, about anchoring. And there's actually a lot of studies that can give you statistically the most statistically high probability time of day to exercise. So we're big believers in exercising early. Not everybody has a circumstance to do that, but statistically, every hour later in the day, your odds of staying consistent with that diminish. Guess what? Same exact principle for meal prep and for food planning. If you can't exercise early, then anchor it to something that doesn't move. In other words, I'm dropping off Johnny at 2:00, picking him up from school. Hey, let's exercise on the way to or from. Same exact strategy. Anchor it to something in your day that doesn't move. Make it a fixture in your regimen, and you will become addicted to the time savings once you get it into a habit.
I wonder, too, how much mindset plays a role here, because I feel like those people who prioritize getting their training in have this mindset that they will find a way to do it. They'll find that sliver of time to fit it in, whether it's a busy week or not. And it's that athlete mentality that carries them through a week, navigating pockets of time when they can fit it in. And if they applied that same mindset to nutrition and meal prep and meal planning and consuming good food, if that also would help, I've got to assume it does help with this process quite a bit.
Well, Chris, what you just brought up is one of the fundamental things we coach on. That is a very strong priority hierarchy. And most people don't really understand where things line up. Now, the pros do. They have to, because their career depends on it. So what are the three most absolutely wildly relevant things you have to do that are the priorities? But when we kind of trickle down to the average individual, the enthusiast, et cetera, it's really easy for that to become a gray area. Now, I'm going to give you a dramatic illustration here, but I think it fits. So, when I developed my program, that was for the absolute min-maxing human performance. I was working with the NFL MVP at the time. I'm working with Olympic athletes, the best of the best. As you could imagine, 95+% of our clients are just like you and I, regular guys, regular gals trying to, just live our best life. So what happens is, I think the stat, don't quote me on this, but it's right around 83% of clients we coach tell me that body composition or fat loss is part of their goals. Now, not everyone. Some people are coming to us needing to put on 10 pounds of muscle or whatever they're trying to do. But when we evaluate where they're investing their time, if weight loss is one of the goals, I have a lot of folks that say, well, here, I get up in the morning and then I go to the gym and I do this, and I get up Tuesday and I do that, and I get up Wednesday and I do this. They are shocked when I tell them the number one and most important thing you can do is stay home. Like, really? Stay home? Yes. Stay home and prepare your food. Because if your goal is to change your body composition, then the number one influencer to make that happen is going to be your diet, your nutrition, quality, consistency. And so most people have no problem committing an hour and a half out of their day. But when I talk to some of these Fortune 500 executives that are go, go, go mindset and mentality, I say, look, I just need 15 minutes twice a week to do meal prep. It's hard to wrap their head around how important that is on the priority hierarchy. So yes, Chris, you hit the nail on the head. By recognizing that is one of the most wildly relevant things you can do to optimize your results, you're going to be way ahead of the game.
Yep, I believe that 100%. This is the first year I never hit my race weight. And also this year, more than any year that I can ever remember, I was eating dinner out multiple nights a week.
Does that have something to do with a girlfriend?
Yes. Completely to do with the girlfriend.
Just,
but
just
don't tell her I said that.
Wild guess.
Well, then that's forgivable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Things you got to do. So I think it's probably pretty clear here, but the purpose of this episode and what we're going to talk about for the rest of it is how to plan your nutrition. We've done a ton of episodes on what should you eat, what shouldn't you eat, what helps performance, what doesn't help performance. But I was surprised to look back and all the episodes we've done on nutrition, we never did one on here's the way to plan your week, here's the way to plan your day. And I think that's really valuable. So I'm kind of excited about this episode and just making it a good practical, here's the suggestions, here's the things you should do, here's the things you shouldn't do. But before we get there, the last thing I do need to ask you is just some of the basics of planning. What things do they need to know? For example, should you be focusing completely on carbohydrates, protein, and fat ratios? Is it all about timing? What are just some of the basics that we need to understand before we can have this conversation about planning?
Okay. I'm going to take you for a little bit of a left turn here, if you'll allow me, to set the foundation. So the answer to all of those questions may surprise you. In fact, I built a business, a system, a company, a nutrition coaching model off of the answer to that particular question. And that is, you asked me, how much protein, carbs, fats, what should I be emphasizing? And the answer to that question is, I don't know.
Good answer.
And I would further, and maybe this is a little salacious, but I would further posture that if I don't know, nobody knows. And the reason nobody knows is because you have to answer prerequisite questions before you can give an intelligent, calculated answer to how much calories, protein, carbs, fat, macronutrient ratios, meal timing, glycemic load, we can go on and on. What's optimal for you? I have to first know, who are you? What are you trying to accomplish? Here's the really important one. What is currently maintaining you in homeostasis? In other words, what are you currently doing? So how much protein, carbs, fats, and the timing, all that is heavily predicated on what your body is currently used to. You know, somebody says, well, you should do a high fat. No, you should do a high carb. You should do moderate protein, no high protein. None of that can really be settled on until we know what you're currently doing that's maintaining your body comp, your body weight, your performance, your energy, your digestion. Once we establish those things, then we can actually mathematically and systematically make best practice recommendations in each of those categories. To start with, what do you guys think if we kind of chop down some basic tenets of sports nutrition? Would you guys be up for that?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
I want to hear your take on this, so please.
So here's the rules. You got to call me out if I'm saying something that doesn't sound right, okay? Because I'm going to introduce some new ideas. So there's basic beliefs in sports nutrition. This is across the athletic industry, the fitness industry, and the medical industry. There are beliefs that they're not wrong, but how to best put this? There's kind of a shadow government running in the background when it comes to our biology, a subtle influencer that's undermining, right? That's pulling the strings behind the scenes in addition to our core beliefs. So let me ask you this question. When we talk about metabolism, what are the major influencers when it comes to discerning where somebody's metabolic rate would be? What are some of the first questions you would ask someone to help determine metabolically what their needs are? What are some of the things that we look at?
Well, start with daily activity. How many calories are you expending?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I talk with people about this, the most common responses I'll get is gender, mass, muscle mass in particular, and activity. Those are kind of the three things that we look at. How big are you? Are you a male or female? And what's your energy expenditure? So we're all in agreement there, right? Now we have a little bit of a problem. Remember that shadow government I mentioned? So those are all true things. Absolutely true. Nothing has changed about the accuracy of what we just discussed there. However, there's another factor that we have to establish. Research now exposes something called adaptive thermogenesis. Sometimes it's referred to as metabolic drift. Now, I'll tell you where I learned about this stuff was after the show The Biggest Loser went off the air. I was one of the guys that inherited a bunch of the contestants to try and rehab their metabolism. You know, because the American public was watching this all play out. A bunch of funding got dumped into research. So they finally had all these research papers saying, oh, you know, maybe having someone exercise 12 hours a day and eating 1,100 calories isn't a great idea for someone's metabolism long term. The old answer that doctors and personal trainers like myself used to give people, right, was, well, yeah, of course your metabolism is slower. A small person requires less calories than a big person. The only problem is that's rubbish. We knew it then, we know it now. It's just rubbish. You can think of often the smallest person in the room has like a hollow leg. You know, they can eat and eat and eat and never gain weight. And sometimes the biggest people in the room are the ones always, you know, eating like a bird because their metabolic rate is running slower. So we knew that wasn't right, but we still kept saying it for years and years. Now we have the research explaining that there's a lot more biologically taking place. Now remember what I said, we're going to chop down those core tenets of sports nutrition. So gender, mass, activity level, big influencers, but I would argue that there is an influencer even more relevant, and I can prove it. So let's say a father and a daughter, they're taking a plane ride together. He just got his pilot's license. They're going over the Pacific. They crash land. They're on a deserted island for a year. They're living off of rations they brought with them. Well, father's a big boy, 300 pounds, okay? Daughter's 8 years old, 75 pounds. Low calorie rations. How many calories? What would you guys say? What's a really, really low calorie intake for a day?
Around 1,000, if not less. I mean, sure. Survival. It's going to be different for the two of them.
I'm glad you said that. Hold that thought, Trevor. Hold that thought. Okay. So let's say these ration packs are 1,000 calories each.
Yep.
Okay. So is the father going to say, well, I'm a bigger person than you, so my daughter's going to just have half a ration? Is he going to do that?
No.
No. Of course not. That's his little princess. He's going to make her eat every ounce of that, right? So he's going to eat 1,000 calories. She's going to eat 1,000 calories. He's 300 pounds, she's 75 pounds. Here's the question. Will they die on 1,000 calories?
No.
There are a lot of factors to consider here. She's growing, so she has higher nutritional needs. You said he's 300 pounds, but a lot of that weight is adipose tissue, which is metabolically inactive tissue. So the question is, how much metabolically active tissue does he have? Plus, he can survive a lot, basically catabolizing a lot of that adipose tissue. So, yeah, let's hear your answer, but it's not as black and white as it might sound.
I'll give you something that is black and white. There are entire countries in this world where the inhabitants exist on barely over 1,000 calories a day.
Yep.
So no, they will not die on 1,000 calories. Now, assuming there weren't secondary medical concerns, right? Just from 1,000 calories a day, neither one of them would die. They certainly will not thrive.
No.
But they wouldn't die. Are we in agreement on that point?
Yeah.
Sure.
You know my background. You know I love the thrifty gene hypothesis. Our bodies are highly adapted to deal with low caloric availability.
You're right. So here's the question. A year later, 18 months later, they're rescued. Okay, now he's obviously going to lose a bunch of weight.
Yes.
But at some point, he's going to stop losing weight, correct?
Correct.
Because if he doesn't stop losing weight, he's dead.
Yep.
So now we have a 75-pound, 8-year-old girl and maybe he loses 100 pounds, 120 pounds, right? Now, 180-pound or a 200-pound male. They are both eating 1,000 calories a day. They are neither gaining nor losing weight. That's homeostasis. That is the state that has to occur if they don't die. They're both burning exactly 1,000 calories a day. Which one has a faster metabolic rate?
It's going to be the same.
Exactly. But we never talked about gender, muscle mass, or activity level, did we?
Look, so I got to throw this in. My major when I was getting my master's was exercise bioenergetics. It was the study of metabolism. And right in one of my first classes, our professor defined metabolism. And you hear, you know, particularly you get on social media and people talk about metabolism speeding up and slowing down, and they make it sound really complex and this extraordinary thing and how much it dramatically changes when you age. The definition of metabolism is incredibly simple. It is the net of energy consumed versus energy expended through the day. That's it.
That's right.
That's metabolism. So when you say your metabolism slows down, all you're saying is, I burn fewer calories through the day. That's it.
Right.
Go out for a 6-hour bike ride, you just sped up your metabolism. It's that simple.
Sure. That's it.
And that's what you were getting at with the analogy.
Your metabolism adapts.
It does.
It has to adapt to your intake. And the reason that it's hard to put our finger on is because it's not death by a single bullet. It's death by 1,000 cuts.
Yes.
Everything from, mitochondrial enzymes to the hypothalamus and the brainstem to powerful hormones, leptin and ghrelin and appetite and insulin, of course, all influence energy expenditure throughout the day, and they can all tune just a little bit. And that shouldn't surprise us, right? Our bodies are highly adaptive. We spend time in the sun, the pigment of our skin changes, we lift heavy weights, our muscles hypertrophy and grow. We do a lot of endurance training, our heart muscle becomes more competent and our VO2 max goes up, right? Across the board, our bodies acclimate to our environment. So what happens is our metabolic rates acclimate to our environment as well. And that has to be the starting question. When we define now applying this to athletics, if your metabolism can be changed, it can be controlled. And metabolism, people think, is just something that individuals looking for weight loss need to be concerned with. That is absolutely not the case. So with all of my high performing athletes, what we do is we find ways to condition their metabolism so we can push more fuel through them. More fuel, the right fuel, of course, means greater recovery capacity. It means being able to get back and train harder, train more frequently. And it gives you leverage if you do need to body recomp or change your body weight. All of these things are such critical factors, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot out there that's tracking that component. which is why the foundation is we have to establish where an individual is entering at, where homeostasis is for them, so we can help plan out a path to enhance performance. Once we know where we're starting from, it's really I'm not going to say simple, but it's a doable mathematical calculation. And so that's the foundation. There is good news though, because everybody's like, well, duh, Angelo, of course, if I eat less, my metabolic rate slows down. I can tell you that happens to me all the time. Guess what? We have a problem with the law of thermodynamics here. If you eat more, your metabolic rate speeds up, and we can prove that also. So, Trevor, do you mind me asking approximately what your body weight is? You look ultra fit to me.
Well, so my race weight is 158. Right now I'm 170.
Okay. So here's a quick question. Now, again, I'm using dramatic illustrations here, right? The starvation illustration on the island.
And by the way, I don't want to go on a tangent, but I was expecting to bring up brand adipose tissue when you were talking about that, but you didn't.
We'll circle back.
Okay.
So what would happen, just curious, because I've asked thousands of people this. I'm curious what you would say. What would happen? You change nothing about your training. You change nothing about your typical daily diet and intake. But you add a pint of, what's your favorite ice cream flavor?
I don't eat ice cream. Couple times a year I have it. Oh God, what's it called? It's an ice cream shop here. It's like, I think, birthday cake.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
If I'm going to have ice cream, I will go there and get their birthday cake because it's amazing.
There you go. Okay, so this is just for illustration purposes. So pretend that because your body's probably not used to getting a whole bunch of lactose and, pretend you didn't have a gut bomb. Just from a pure energy perspective, a pint of Ben & Jerry's or Haagen-Dazs ice cream is approximately 1,000 calories a day.
Yep.
What would happen to you in a month if you had a pint every night? Would you gain weight?
Oh, of course.
How much? Ballpark.
So I'm going to qualify that with nothing else about my diet changes. I just add the Ben & Jerry's.
Correct. Yep.
So the simple answer, which I know you're going to say is wrong, but I know where you're going with this. So 3,000 calories is approximately 1 pound of fat. So theoretically, I would put on about 10 pounds of fat because over 30 days, I would consume 30,000 calories. That'd be 10 pounds of fat. But I don't think it would be quite that much. I think there would be some adaptation in the body.
You've got it. And so in the first month, and like I said, I've asked thousands of people this. In the first month, most people tell me they'd gain between 5 and 10 pounds is what they say, just intuitively not knowing the math. So 3,500 calories in 1 pound of body fat, it doesn't work exactly that way. But yes, that would be 2 pounds a week based on the math. Except here's the problem. That breaks down after about 3 weeks to 30 days. Because then when I ask, now let's just say you really like that birthday cake ice cream. So you keep eating that every night for a year. Is there any chance you would gain 104 pounds? Because that's 2 pounds a week, 52 weeks in a year. Is there any chance you would gain 104 pounds?
No.
No. Absolutely not. So for all of our listeners, here's what Trevor just said. Trevor just said, birthday cake ice cream speeds your metabolism.
No, what I said is birthday cake ice cream is amazing. You're the one saying everything about calories.
Fair.
That is the only statement I'm making here.
That's fair. Okay. People are going to write it saying, wait a second, I'm trying. This isn't working. This is a dramatic illustration, of course. Don't try this at home. You are not going to be happy with the result.
No.
But unless there was something metabolically broken, there is no chance you would gain by the numbers 104 pounds. Why? Exactly what Trevor just said. That's that adaptive response. So, of course, we don't do it that way, but what it proves is you can speed your metabolic rate based on intake levels because we didn't change anything else. The body is adaptive. So here's the take-home message. We can control our metabolism. And I find that for athletes, by tracking where their metabolic rate is, and that's not that hard to do, by tracking where that metabolic rate is, we can vastly enhance the optimization process and individualize it for each person so that way they actually can answer those questions of what's the optimal protein, carbs, fats, timing, et cetera, that everyone asks.
So that whole conversation, we were talking about weight gain and weight loss. The one thing we didn't cover, and it's important just to mention, is the unbelievably negative health consequences eating a pint of birthday cake ice cream would have on you every single day. And that is important.
Of course.
But I get completely what you're talking about. And this is why people get frustrated. Again, I look at evolutionary biology, and we became incredibly well adapted at dealing with caloric scarcity so that we survive. So yes, when you have caloric scarcity, your body is really good at shutting down processes. That's part of why I mentioned the brown adipose tissue, so that when you're eating less calories, you don't keep losing weight and your body can find homeostasis. The issue that we have is we didn't evolve a lot of systems to deal with caloric excess. Our body doesn't want to put on excess weight. It likes to actually put on some because you never know when you're going to get your next meal. But it just doesn't know how to deal with extreme caloric excess because that never happened during evolutionary times. So we don't have good systems to deal with that. It can adapt a little, and that's what you're saying. It'll speed up your metabolic rate, but not to the point that it can keep you at the ideal body composition that you would want.
Correct. Yeah. And so I'll give you another extreme. And exactly as you just said, Trevor, yeah, these are just, I use these dramatic illustrations so it'll stick out in their mind.
Mm-hmm.
In application, these aren't the foods that we use.
Yeah.
So I'll share with you the secrets to having a structured approach to speeding your metabolic rate, therefore being able to, for the athletes, push more fuel in an integrated approach in a way that's going to drive performance versus body fat gains. You guys have probably seen those shows, the 900-pound man get on Discovery Health getting taken out of his house and the crane and the whole, it's, these, bummer situations. But, for the dramatic effect, they show what these people are eating, and the camera will pan across and, the 2 cheese pizzas, the 3 things of the 2-liter bottles of Pepsi and on and on and on and on. The way most people think about this is, okay, that poor man, he has a really slow metabolism. But that's not technically accurate.
No.
He has a metabolism that can outpace Michael Phelps. He has an Olympian metabolism. The dietitians that work with this guy, they're going to put him, on 4,000 calories a day, and the weight is going to melt off of him in the first, few months, right? And that's just sitting there. That's because the body has tried to compensate for that overconsumption. But to your point, Trevor, it's not able to do so fully.
It's really important to understand our bodies are always trying to find homeostasis. And if you reach a weight where your weight is not changing, you are in homeostasis. You are consuming the same amount of calories as you are burning.
That is exactly right. Yep. And when I'm dealing with weight loss clients or recomp clients, people want to know what's happening here. If I've stopped losing weight, am I doing something wrong? Nope. It just means your body, your metabolism is doing its job. It is recreating homeostasis. Now we need to adjust something so that way your body will further adapt in the direction that we want it.
Mm-hmm.
Really interesting things to think about. But the takeaway here is for the athlete or for anyone struggling to optimize and see how they can reach their goals is this. If your metabolic rate can change, it can be controlled. And that's good news.
On the hunt for your next great cycling destination? Let me tell you about Fayetteville, Arkansas. There are so many reasons to visit, not least of which is the Cyclocross National Championships on December 10th to 14th. What's better than cyclocross at a venue that hosted Worlds in 2022? There's also the purpose-built bikepacking network created by Bikepacking Routes, the only nonprofit devoted to expansion of bikepacking in the U.S. Overnighters, multiple-day trips, this suite of routes has something for everyone. And then there's Fayetteville itself, which is the only UCI-recognized bike city in America. Once your riding is done, the fun continues with restaurants and breweries and bike-friendly hotels that cater to cyclists of all kinds. Fayetteville, your new favoriteville. Head to favoriteville.com to explore one of America's top-rated bike cities where world-class cycling is just the beginning. So with that, I said we were going to do an episode mostly on planning, so I think we're 30 minutes in here. Let's jump over to planning because I really want to hear your thoughts. As I said, I really enjoyed using MetPro and having it kind of help me map out my days. So let's start with the individual day. What are your thoughts to our listeners about mapping out a day? Should you do 3 square meals? Should you snack? Should you eat before bed? Should you fast in the morning? What are your various thoughts and how should they approach this? And I get the sense you're going to go very principle-based on this.
So I have to chuckle. Yep. A lot of it, there's art and science. When I'm working with my athletes in particular, there's a lot of the numbers, but then there's a lot of the art as well. What a person can do effectively.
Mm-hmm.
At MetPro, we apply a lot of different sciences, but we lean into the most practical ones the most heavily because ones that we're able to execute on tend to yield the best results versus having something highly complex that's hard to execute. So 3 square meals, there's nothing wrong with it. If you're working with me and if I'm your coach, you're going to eat snacks. And it's for none of the reasons that you'd think. Because I can show you the research that shows the benefit of small meals frequently, the research that seems to indicate that there's no difference. It's all total intake. But if you're working with me, you're going to have snacks and you'll be surprised the reason. You ready?
Yes.
Please.
We don't eat snacks socially, so I can control them. That's the reason. So in other words, you're going to have lunches with your business partners. You're going to have dinners at grandma's house and the family. There are going to be a statistical percentage of times that we're not going to be able to control consumption at major meals. But nobody calls up Eddie and says, hey, Eddie, meet me at the water cooler. We're going to have an apple and 12 almonds. It's not a social event.
Yeah.
So I can more heavily control what we're consuming at those times. So it gives me a stronger anchor to create a habit throughout the day. That's why I use snacks. Now, there is also a metabolic benefit. The research is very conclusive. If you're eating X amount of calories, macronutrient ratios being roughly equivocal, whether you're eating that over 6 meals a day versus 2 or 3 meals a day, the outcome is roughly the same. However, here's the little asterisk. I can tell you from practical experience, that is not the case when it comes to increasing your intake. If I'm trying to increase someone's intake and I only have 2 or 3 meals to spread it across versus increasing intake and I have 5 or 6 meals to spread it across, I as a coach have a lot more leverage and can add much quicker than if I had to put it all in 1 or 2 places. So there's a little bit of the art and a little bit of the science that goes with that.
Yep. It was interesting. I was getting ready for this episode. I found a study from 2019 called Snacking in Nutrition and Health. And it was from a more standard journal. So I was expecting them to say, no, eat your 3 square meals and snacks are bad for you. And this review was the exact opposite. Said that it can actually be healthier to have several snacks through the day. Now, they do qualify, eat fruits, nuts, healthy things. If you're eating Cheetos for your snacks, no.
Right.
But they talked a lot about just the heavy impact on your body of having 3 really big meals and that it can be easier on your body to spread it out a little more and you can actually get a little better nutrient density that way.
Well, consider the implications for endurance athletes. So right now I have 2 gentlemen. One just competed in Nice a few weeks back and then the previous year in Kona, right? I mean, we're talking about top of the top. Could you imagine if I was trying to squeeze all of the nutrition they needed for recovery and optimization into 3 meals a day? Those would be massive meals. Now, everyone's different. I have elite performing that aren't on massively high calories, but the average is at a very high caloric intake. And in order to consume that, that would be such a gut bomb to try and digest that many just over 3 meals. So I would say at the elite level, you're almost forced into a more frequent fueling if you want to really optimize. But there are no hard, fast rules around that.
Yep. So I got to laugh. I did a ride a couple months ago where I did one of my 6-hour rides. I went up in the mountains, did not take enough food with me. I was not near any stores, so I dramatically underate on the ride. Pretty much didn't eat the whole day and then tried to cram all those calories into my dinner and just said to my girlfriend, I'm ordering a pizza. Screw it. I'm just having a pizza. And we're eating together and she just kind of starts watching me. And when I'm basically done eating a whole pizza by myself, she just looks at me and goes, that was gross.
That's happened more than once.
Not the words you want to hear from your girlfriend, Trevor.
No.
Oh, that's funny.
But I bring that up because there is that point of, I agree with you. If you are having to eat a lot of calories through the day and you're trying to cram it into 1 or 2 meals, you end up going the gross route. I wasn't going to try to eat a giant piece of salmon and enough vegetables to replace 4,000 calories. It was order the pizza.
I love that, Trevor. Don't go the gross route. So let's give a little bit of the science and just practical experience on this. So the opposite is true, okay? So I've worked with some individuals who are athletic, training, but they're not exactly competing in Ironman competitions, right? And their primary goal is to recomp or lose weight, and they're on a lower intake. You try and spread a low caloric intake across 5 or 6 meals, and no one meal ever hits bottom, you end up just hungry all day. And you can even establish low blood sugar, things like that, versus if you actually just had 3 or 4 meals that were substantial enough to hit bottom. So again, I'm not really helping anyone out because people are scratching their head going, so what do I do? It really is individualized. It depends on what your goal is, where you're starting, and where you want to move to. And that kind of dovetails into the should I eat fat, low fat, high fat? To answer a question like that, it really comes down to, do we need it? So I want to establish adequate protein. I want to establish adequate carbs. How much fats does somebody need? Because if I have someone who requires 3,600 calories, there's no chance I'm getting there with chicken breast and brown rice.
Right.
Just no chance. So in that case, we are actually forced to increase fats beyond a certain point if we want to hit. But if somebody doesn't have those needs, then we really have options. And there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's lots of approaches that can work. The key is they should be systematic. They should be tracked and calculated and planned.
Yep. And, to your point, I think it's important to point out that a lot of athletes really do focus on getting enough carbohydrates through the day. Carbohydrates, particularly high glycemic carbohydrates, spike insulin. The thing to know about insulin is insulin actually increases hunger signals. So it is a bit of a vicious cycle where if you start eating those carbohydrates, you spike insulin, then you're hungrier and you want to eat more. So if you're trying to get little bits of high glycemic carbohydrates through the day, you're going to be miserable. You're going to be hungry all the time.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And so you could point to the bodybuilding industry, right? The physique sports. What are their goal is to drive body fat percentage as low as possible. What types of food are they eating? They're eating really low glycemic carbs. They're eating proteins. Why are they doing that? Well, exactly what you just said. Also, those lower glycemic foods tend to fall under the more satiating categories.
And this is what I tell athletes. If you're going to eat the high glycemic carbohydrates, do it around your workout, either during your workout, right before, or right after. The rest of the day, you should really be focusing on the low glycemic carbohydrates.
Yep, spot on.
So what else should we know about the day? How do you feel about eating before bed or not eating when you wake up in the morning?
So I don't have a strong, you have to do it one way or the other, but it really should be justifiable. So why would we not eat at night? So here's some reasons that we would not eat at night. If you're going to increase the fasting window, everybody fasts every day when we sleep at night. If you want to increase that fasting window, I'm a much bigger fan of doing it at night versus in the morning. And so if recomping, reducing caloric intake is a goal of yours, then it would make sense to thin out caloric intake right before you're preparing to go to sleep. It doesn't make as much sense to thin out caloric intake right before you start your most active part of the day for athletic performance. I would argue this is more of a behavioral thing, digestively and just appetite-wise. People find it easier. We wake up, hit the ground running, culturally, socially, with our lifestyles. It's easy to skip meals in the morning, so a lot of people like to do a morning fasted. Is that the end of the world if you do that? No, it's not the end of the world. Some people with ravenous appetites do find that starting their day a little bit later is one means of lowering total caloric intake. So there is no right or wrong here. But given a perfect circumstance, if I had an athlete that I was trying to optimize their nutrition for, I would probably opt to have them at least try to start having breakfast within an hour of waking up, fuel their body properly, and eat in reasonably small increments throughout the day, and even getting some additional protein before bed at night in combination with some slow burning carbohydrates and slower digesting proteins as well that aren't going to be the immediate. That's min-maxing a little bit, but that is good practice. None of those things, Trevor, none of those things end up being the make or break. What ends up being the make or break is the day before. Johnny, did you prepare your meals? And here are the meals I want you to prepare. I want you to prepare your lunches and your snacks. I don't care about breakfast. I don't care about dinner. Here's why. Watching thousands and thousands of people and behaviors, tracking, engaging with them. What I find is very few people struggle with a consistent breakfast once they're on board. Once they're like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm trying to improve my health, or I'm trying to improve my performance, or I'm trying to recomp. Breakfast is not where I have troubles with that. You're going to do fine with breakfast. You wake up in the morning in the same spot. As long as you have the ingredients in your house, you can have breakfast. What happens is between 9 a.m. and about 3:30 p.m., there is nothing planned. We hit the ground running. We got to drop off Johnny. We got to meet this deadline for the boss. We're just running, and food becomes the afterthought. So if you are one of my clients, you're going to send me a picture of your lunches for 3 days and your snacks for 3 days prepared in advance. And that's what I'm grading you on, because I know if I can get you into a pattern of preparing lunches and snacks in advance, I am going to work magic with you. If I can't get you into that pattern, anything else, it's just temporary. And that doesn't mean you have to be a martyr. I fully believe in cheat meals. I fully believe in having pizza with your girlfriend once in a while, right? Not as your day-to-day routine. It's Tuesday morning, nothing's going on, don't eat pizza. So here's what that looks like and why it's actually not that hard. Cook in bulk. Cook macros in bulk. Okay, so figure out what proteins you like. There's lots of quality proteins out there. Figure out what animal protein, or if you're a vegetarian or vegan, what plant-forward, plant-based protein you like, and do not cook 1 or 2 meals worth. So my wife and I, if you open our refrigerator, you'll see 2 giant tins. I keep 2 different proteins cooked at all times. So right now, I've got a cooked thing with chicken breast in one, which, by the way, I grill it, I season it, it's delicious. I like to make it taste good. So I have all these cooked chicken breasts, and then in another, I usually have some sort of red meat because that's what I like to eat. And I go back and forth between those for my protein. In another tin, I will have, for me, I like sweet potatoes. My wife likes brown rice. I'm not a big fan of brown rice. You'll find something you like. Cook it in bulk, have those 2 major ingredients ready. Then all you have to do is add to it your vegetables, because that you can't really prep in advance. You just have to have vegetables handy in the house, whatever vegetables or salad you're going to do. And you have to have a fat, and that's easy. It can be an oil, it can be avocado, it can be any simple fat source. And eat whole foods. If you're trying to do this with complex recipes or foods that have a paragraph of ingredients, it's just not going to work out for you. And if you feel like that's too restrictive, just think of it in these terms. Eat whatever your grandparents ate growing up. If you stick to those foods, they didn't have access to boxed foods with 3 paragraphs of synthetic ingredients and preservatives and nonsense, right? That's all there from food manufacturers to have shelf-stable food that lasts on a shelf longer. That's not there for your fuel or your health or your optimization, right? Just stick to whole foods. Make a list of the proteins you want. Make a list of complex, slow burning, to Trevor's point, carbs you want, and have a few good vegetables on hand. I like my clients to eat fruits as part of their snacks, because if you keep that as a routine, then I know we're not missing those vital micronutrients. And it's cliche, but shop the perimeter, right? What they say, there is a reason for that. And if you eat these whole foods, building food and meals becomes easy. Now, again, I'm not saying you can't ever go out and have some lasagna. You can absolutely do that. But that shouldn't be your base meal plan.
That's kind of what I was hinting at earlier on. I was asking you, what are the foundations of this? Because the issue I have is you see so many people in the nutrition world who just focus on carbohydrates, protein, fat, and is a high carbohydrate diet good or bad for you? And I always say you can't say one way or the other, because broccoli is a carbohydrate, candy is a carbohydrate. You can have a high carbohydrate diet that's horrible for you. You can have a high carbohydrate diet that's good for you, but you need to factor in the sources. I'm very glad to hear you say, and I know this is my soapbox, eat more natural foods, eat nutrient-dense foods.
And labels don't work, right?
Right.
So French fries and beer is vegan. So,
yes.
It's just common sense, guys. Common sense.
All of this sounds very simple. My next question, and putting myself in the mindset of busy American humans, is, God, I have to go to the grocery store and think about a whole week's worth of food. And when am I going to find the time to do that? And when am I going to shop? So what's their answer when people come to you with that problem? How do you overcome that?
Chris, now you sound like one of my actual clients. This is it. This is exactly how we work with our clients, is helping them navigate precisely verbatim what Chris just said. So yes, you do need to learn the skill of shopping and prepping. But the reality is there is 101 life hacks that we can use to make this simpler. So I'll give you two right out of the gate that I use like for my busy executives. So one, when you need a meal, don't think restaurant, think grocery store. If you go to a good quality grocery store that has a good quality deli counter, you can get everything we just talked about pre-made. You'll spend a small premium to have someone else cook it for you, but you can get a vegetable medley, you can get grilled protein, lean protein, you can get slow digesting carbohydrates, prepared, seasoned, delicious, already made, and buy it in bulk. When you live a lifestyle that requires you to eat out often, which, by the way, lots of my clients eat out often. If you were my client, what I would do is I would say, I want you to give me 3 restaurants that are nearby your work or your house or wherever you frequent. What are your 3 favorite restaurants? I have them send that to me based on the macro profiles of the meal plan I currently have them on. What I will do is I will look at the menus for each of those 3 restaurants, and I'll come up with 2 or 3 menu items from each restaurant, and I will copy and paste and put them on a little sheet, a little quick one sheet for reference. That will be your personal ordering menu. And I have them put it on their refrigerator or their desk at work. And when they think, I want to eat out, or I need something to eat, or I need to call and order out something, you go to this one sheet and you don't have to think about it. You don't have to peruse a menu. You already know your 3 favorite restaurants, 2 or 3 meals from each place that you can swap through that are going to be close to your ideal macros and your values for lunch, and you don't even have to think about it. And then the third strategy, which is a little less precise, but it works for the busy on-the-go person, is you almost can't screw up protein and vegetables at any restaurant. You can go and order protein and vegetables, and then you can bring your own carbs. Like, oh, that sounds complicated. No, it's not complicated. Keep an apple with you. Eat it on the way to the restaurant. Go and get protein and vegetables. Because if there's a problem at a restaurant where you can't get a meal that's precise to your goals, it typically is that they don't have the right carbs. Not all restaurants, more and more today, have great options. But if that's the problem, go and get your protein and vegetables and just pack some fruit or something, a banana, right? Eat a banana on the way to your restaurant, and then you can just order a chicken salad. And there, it's not the end of the world.
The one quick thing I'm going to add to this, and you might argue with me on this one, if you are eating out a lot, remember that restaurants want you to like their food. The quickest way to make food taste better is to add salt to it. If you are eating out a lot, you are getting a lot of salt in your diet. And I know you're, as athletes, probably all reading about how important salt is to you. And then trying to get all these drinks that are high in sodium, you're probably already getting enough salt in your diet. Probably getting too much.
Trevor speaks the truth. Absolutely. You're spot on. You know, I will say this. In general, the movement is more and more restaurants popping up that really do support people health conscious. Mm-hmm. But that what you just said is absolutely the case. They don't care about your fitness goals. They care about they make the food taste good.
Yep.
Yep.
Healthy eating can be a challenge. Sports nutrition is all about knowing what to eat, when, how much, and avoiding temptations that can derail your plans. I'm Jared Berg, and I'm a registered dietitian and exercise physiologist with Fast Talk Labs. I've created a new 8-week sports nutrition course to help you break old habits and establish healthier, high-performance fueling practices for years to come. Learn more and get started on fasttalklabs.com. Look for athlete services and sports nutrition.
So we've kind of gotten into the week. What other thoughts and suggestions do you have about planning the week? So I agree with you 100%. Do your cooking ahead of time. I've already talked about that on the show. But should you then be consistent through the week? Should you be trying to eat basically the same way, the same thing every day? Or do you have some days that are lower calorie, some days that are higher calorie, some days where you're higher protein, where you're higher carbohydrate? And obviously, you know, my bias there, again, just focus on foods, but I want to hear your thoughts on all this.
Yeah, that's a great question, Trevor. I'm glad you asked that. So by the science, optimal would be a varied intake level based on your activity. That is what research in the science says. After dieting thousands and thousands of people, I want you to just have a base meal plan and adjust your intra-training fuel based on your activity. Now, maybe for your if you have a weekend ride that's particularly long, maybe you alter your diet that one day of the week. But I would strongly recommend heavy bias towards a consistent meal plan that doesn't change day to day. The accessories change day to day based on, okay, if you're doing a longer ride or a longer run or a longer training session, maybe you have a post-workout, something that you add in that's premeditated, or during your intra-training fuel, you increase. That represents the major shift in your intake. And again, this is where we blend the art and the science. I have built protocols that are to the umpteenth for people. And what I get pretty much across the board is poor adherence. So what I want is something reproducible. We're going to be able to get amazing results if we're consistent. Consistency trumps all those other factors. So we're going to figure out what your base meal plan needs to be. And it's not that hard. All you're doing is prepping lunches and a couple snacks. And these snacks are going to be super easy, right? I'm talking fruit and nut stuff here. You know, it doesn't have to be that, but super easy. By the way, I recommend doing a similar snack for mid-morning and mid-afternoon, just so that way you don't have to prepare two things. Just so it's super simple. So that takes care of more than 60% of your daily nutrition. Now we add breakfast to that, and you're not going to mess up breakfast because people just don't. They get breakfast right. Now all you got to do is get through dinners. You just got to get through dinners and you're dialed. So yeah, I'm a real big believer in having a base meal plan. And there's another reason why that's fundamental, because when I work with someone, for example, and anybody can apply this on their own, by the way, but if I work with someone, I take them through a process called baseline testing, where based on what they're currently eating, their activity level, all the homeostasis and all those metabolic factors we mused about earlier, I am going to take a guess, an educated guess. It'll be a pretty good guess, but it's still a guess at what intake is going to meet someone's needs and create that homeostasis. And I'm going to put you on a meal plan that's boring. There's nothing special about it. The only thing special about it is that, all right, Trevor, the meal plan I put you on, I've had about 1,400 other guys roughly your size, roughly your activity level follow, and I have statistics and data and outcomes from them so I can see where you fall on a sliding scale. I want you to follow that meal plan for 72 hours. That's it. Be real strict for 72 hours. And at the end of that 72 hours, there is a finite amount of possible outcomes, right? Assuming energy and digestion are good, we have to make sure energy, performance, and digestion are healthy. Otherwise, we got to modify. Assuming those are all good, did you gain weight, lose weight, or stay the same weight? That gives us our metabolic indicators for where your metabolism is and where your homeostasis is. Based on that, we can build from there. We can increase, decrease, whatever we need to do, and we can do so with precision. If you're eating something different every day, if you don't have a base meal plan, we don't have the control to be able to manipulate that. I'm going to guess what you might be thinking. You might be thinking 72 hours, that's not long enough.
He's smiling. He's smiling a lot.
Sort of. I'll actually tell you what I'm thinking because, so as I mentioned to you earlier, I also own a nutrition company. And I'm only bringing this up because you made me think about something that has happened multiple times at that nutrition company where we promote a particular approach. And I've had people come and join the company who don't actually follow that approach and said, oh, I want to try this. And they tried it for 7 days or they tried it for 28 days and actually wrote an article about their experience. And every time afterwards, I've asked them, be honest with me, how did you feel? And they go, oh, I felt better. I lost weight. I had more energy. And I went, so are you going to stick with this? No. And that's what you made me think about. So yeah, my question to you is, you give them 72 hours, they're probably at the end of this going to go, oh, this is working. I feel better. In 72 hours, it's hard to really lose any weight, but they might see some positive signs. What's going to stop them from saying the same thing and just going, I saw all these positive things. I'm not going to stick to it.
So what we do is we customize to the individual. Well, I mean, within reason. If someone's like, well, I'll do it as long as I can have pizza and beer every night, my program's not for you, right? So you're looking for a different plan, sir. But in 72 hours, this is kind of an interesting story. I think you'll appreciate this. What we used to do years ago, so we've been doing this years and years, is I would have somebody baseline test for 7 days. And we really collect a lot of data. I mean, even right down to the timing of those meals, everything during just that baseline testing period. Being that an intensive ongoing would be a little rigorous, right? But during that baseline testing period, what I'm trying to do is really establish someone's metabolic baseline. So the coaches and we conducted some research and experiment. So what we did was we used the retrospective data from our clients. And we would show the coaches, here's the recommendation we made at the end of 7 days. Okay, up 6%, down 6% intake, an adjustment of 10% macronutrients one way or the other, right? Okay, so small, minor adjustments. We took actual client data and we just showed the coaches the data from 5 days. What adjustment would you have made? And it turned out the data from 5 days and the data from 7 days, almost identical. It was the same recommendation, like 96, 97% of the time. Then we went from 5 days to 3 days of data. Now, how would that compare against what you said recommended at 7 days? It was the same, and this might shock you, it was the same 85% of the time. So while it's not a 100% guarantee, 85% of the time, if someone is strict for 72 hours, we can at least collect enough data to make an 85% accurate recommendation. Keep in mind, we're making small adjustments. We're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater each time. And even if we got it wrong, we would still catch it in another 72 hours, which would still be less than 7 days. Now, we got cocky and we said, okay, I'm going to try at just 48 hours of data. It was a complete disaster. There's just no accuracy whatsoever. So 72 hours is we have found the smallest common denominator of data that we can action. And so that's why that's our current protocol. And every year we reevaluate and we try and find ways to fine tune. That seems to be the best science that we have found to date.
So as we're getting towards the end of this episode, let's shift gears here and just talk specifically about endurance athletes. Are there any changes, modifications you make for them? And you had mentioned this ahead of the episode. You really want to touch on this sweet spot between light, lean, and powerful. So let's finish up with those couple thoughts.
So that's probably when I'm working with my endurance athletes, and that's cyclists, runners, et cetera. They're typically coming not only to improve their performance, of course, but they're coming with the fundamental question, what's my optimal body weight and how do I get there? And that is very nuanced. So there's a lot of common mistakes and pitfalls that have to be avoided. It's not as cut and dry as, well, in your off season, you adjust your body comp. In your on season, you just focus on performance. Though that is true. A lot of it has to do with how much leverage you have. In your off season, if you don't have a lot of leverage, in other words, if you're eating 1,900 calories a day in your off season, that's not your cutting time, right? Depending on where you are, who you are, et cetera, et cetera. But if we have leverage, we look at leverage and time to race or your event, and we can actually calculate how to map out revving cycles, revving/performance cycles, because they really are the same thing, and then cutting cycles to find your optimal. And be honest about your performance. So if we're being brutally honest, most athletes actually perform their best a couple pounds heavier than the weight they tell me they want to be at. Not 15 pounds heavier, mind you, right? Not 15 pounds, a couple pounds heavier with just that little bit extra for fuel. But that's where the human brain and our psychology and the aesthetic drive kind of biases us from time to time. And by the way, if that's your goal, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We can tune it for aesthetics if that's your thing. But know this, that for optimizing your performance, we want to give your body not just what it needs, when it needs it for your races and training and high intensity training, but we want to give it plus a little extra, because the performance you're going to get out of that versus the performance you're going to get out of taking half a pound to a pound off of your body, it's not a good trade. It's not a good trade. So we can deal with major body comp shifts when we have a little bit of space out from your race. And then there's a lot of people that want to use their endurance sports as a vehicle in service of recomping. And there's nothing wrong with that either. If that's your passion, that's what, hey, your doctor said you need to lose 40 pounds and you want to start getting on a bike and riding, but it's in service of the weight loss and you're going to modify the intensity and duration of your ride so that way you can stick to your nutrition plan. There's nothing wrong with that. Just go into it with open eyes and understand the implications of that. And those are the conversations that we have with our clients. And we help them to navigate and really time out over the next 90 days. What's our body comp goals? What's our body weight goals? And when do we have our next race? So we can really put together an intelligent approach to mapping that out and hitting those objectives.
And finally, what are your thoughts about fueling before and after a workout?
My thoughts are yes, please. Let's do that. It's a good idea, Trevor. I like that. Definitely fuel before and after and during, right? If you're an endurance athlete, not if you're going to the gym and doing a 45-minute strength program, right? You don't have to do that. But if you're an endurance athlete, especially if you're doing any activities so this is individual, do not take this as gospel, but I find that if somebody's training, cycling or running for irrelevant of distance, but a duration that based on their ability level and pace exceeds about an hour and 15 minutes, that's when I typically find they need to start really looking at their intra-training fuel versus if somebody's just going out and doing a ride for 45 minutes, they probably don't need to worry about it too much. What do you think about that?
I'm trying to form my own thought here because I did read this review last night, which was the International Society of Sports Nutrition position stand and nutrient timing. And they said in there, below 70 minutes, you don't need to fuel on the ride. Above 70 minutes, you do. So they're in agreement with you.
There you go. 5-minute difference between what I have come to anecdotally. I will tell you, I have some clients that if they're running for more than 30 minutes, they need something. But that is the rare exception. Or cycling, yeah. So that's an individualized thing. But your intra-training fuel, that's out of the scope of what we'll have time to talk about today, but is important to definitely fuel before and some recovery fuel after if you want to be optimal.
What if you reverse engineer it and you say, if by the end of your activity you want to take the gross route and eat an entire pizza, then you've underfueled during your workout? Is that inappropriate?
Ooh.
So we have this saying over here at MetPro, calories you have not yet consumed can't help you. I ate 2,800 calories today. I ate 3,200 calories today. Yeah, but not when you were training, you didn't. Calories you have not yet consumed can't help you. So if you're an athlete, and especially if you're also recomping, you better get those calories in early in the day and work on getting them under your belt, especially if there's going to be high volume training on that day. That's basically, I think, what you were saying there, Chris. Doesn't work if you just don't eat a whole lot and then after your training, you go and overconsume.
Right.
You're mostly just going to give yourself a tummy ache.
My experience has been when athletes say, okay, I want to lose some weight. So what I'm going to do is go out for a workout and dramatically underconsume on the workout.
Mm-hmm.
They end up overcompensating afterwards
Right.
and end up
Absolutely.
gaining weight. Where when you have the athlete eat through the workout, they can finish the workout, get back to regular eating, and actually then they're going to have a better chance of getting down to the weight they want to get down to.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And a couple things on safety here, if you happen to be a beginner just starting out and testing, where you're at and your limits and how your body feels, is I would rather you have something with you. You can always not eat it, not consume it, right? You don't have to have it. Just have it with you in case. Blood sugar, things like that. And if you're really just starting out with bike rides or runs, I tell my clients, if you're new to it, I want you to run in a circle or ride in a circle, not a straight line. Go in a circle so that way at any point you can stop and you're just a few feet from home. If you go in a straight line and you realize you overdid it, you still have to ride or run all the way back.
Mm-hmm.
So, start slow, build gradually. You'll get there in no time.
I hate to say it, but we need to wrap up here. Before we do, though, I would just love for you to take a couple minutes and talk about MetPro. Because like I said, I really wanted to get you on this show because I did that review. I tried your product for 4 months. And I personally love this idea of taking nutrition and treating it like something that we as athletes understand. It's a plan. This is coaching because we really understand that and kind of gravitate to that and really work with that. And I love that idea of let's do the same thing with nutrition. Let's plan out ahead and treat it the way an athlete treats a training plan. So I'm sorry, I'm kind of repeating myself, but please tell us a little more about the product.
Yeah, thank you so much, Trevor. And I'm really grateful that you experienced it and had a good experience with it. We're passionate about what we do. We're a team of coaches. We love the nerdy science of the performance nutrition and tracking people's metabolic rate. Now, that's the piece a lot of people are missing is they've never actually tracked their metabolic rate during the process and really optimized with that as a foundation. And then also just the day-to-day piece of, okay, what's going to work for me? So no two people are alike. We have protocols for 4 meals a day, 5 meals a day, 6 meals a day, 7 meals a day, though that's getting a little extreme, right? And based around all kinds of different lifestyles and schedules. What we like to start with, and we invite people to come and do a free session with us, a consultation where write down for a day or so, just think back, what do you typically eat? Write it down. Think about your training and diet history and come and talk to one of us and we'll share with you what we've done with others in a similar circumstance based on whatever your goals are. We'll share what's worked and what your options are and what the science says and what we think would work for you. And we'll give you options. And if you like what you hear, we'd be happy to work with you. If you're not ready to pull the trigger yet, still come, do a free consult, do a free conversation with us. We're still happy to visit with you because down the road, you'll think of us when it's time.
And if one of our listeners is interested in coming and checking MetPro out, how do they find you?
I know we hadn't talked about this, but we've made a special link for the fast talkers. So if any of the audience want to visit with us, we would be happy to chat. Tell us your experience and we'll share with you what metabolic profiling could look like for you. If you go to metpro.co/fast talk, and that's metpro.co/fast talk, and that's just for your audience.
Well, that's appreciated, and we hope people check that out.
Thanks so much, you guys.
So with that, we have a question for the forum. Do you plan out your nutrition or do you figure it out as you go? And if you plan it out, what are some of the tricks you've learned? So go to forums.fasttalklabs.com to engage in that conversation. And with that, Angelo, first time on the show, we finish out with what we call our take-homes, which is you have 1 minute, and we will cut you off at 59 seconds, even though we don't have a clock.
He's lying. Don't believe him.
You have 1 minute to kind of summarize what you think is the most important takeaway message from this whole episode for our listeners. And I will throw it to you to say, do you want to go first or do you want to go last?
Oh, okay. Well, then I'm going to be reactive. I'll go last. I'll let you guys go first.
So, my take home would be the value of planning, but I think I've kind of beaten that to death throughout the episode. So a second take home I would like to give is I know a lot of athletes really focus on those carbohydrate protein fat ratios, making sure you're getting enough carbohydrates. The message I really want to give is that's a starting point. It's not the end point. You have to go to the next step. And to truly be healthy and truly perform at your best, you need to start talking and thinking about what are the sources of those carbohydrates? What are the sources of those fats and proteins? And I'm really glad you brought this up in the episode, thinking about whole foods, more natural foods, more nutrient-dense foods, because we also need to be getting all those micronutrients, and you only get those through whole foods. So, Chris, what's your take home?
I think it probably goes back to my original question, which has to do with mindset. And this goes to maybe your point about planning. And I'm speaking more from the athlete point of view than the other populations we might be speaking to. But it's somewhat easy for them to think ahead, to plan out when they're going to do their intervals, when they're going to do their long ride, and so on and so forth. To take the next step, you have to do the same with your food. You have to plan it out ahead of time. You can't be reactive. You can't say, oh, it's Tuesday. I forgot to bring anything. I got to go walk to Pearl Street in Boulder, and I got to find something that's going to satisfy me, and the options aren't great, and it's expensive, and all that sort of stuff. And you go through that rigmarole every day if you're not thinking ahead. So comes to Angelo's, I don't want to steal his thunder, but it's a time management thing more so than anything else. So Angelo, before I say anything more, I'll turn it over to you for your final thoughts.
My final thoughts are that the guys at Fast Talk are some rad dudes. So this has been a blast, gentlemen. I've really enjoyed getting to exchange ideas and share some thoughts. I am really passionate about helping educate people on the topic of metabolism and how metabolism, especially you athletes out there, just because you're not trying to lose weight doesn't mean knowing your metabolic rate isn't part of the equation when it comes to optimizing performance. And you can control your metabolism. It is a big key to unlocking your athletic performance potential. And this has just been a blast getting to visit with you guys today.
It's been a pleasure having you. And we never did get back to brown out adipose tissue. So now we're going to have you back on the show.
Time.
Exactly.
There we go. Entire episode on it.
All right, Angelo. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was another episode of Fast Talk. The thoughts and opinions expressed on Fast Talk are those of the individual. Subscribe to Fast Talk wherever you prefer to find your favorite podcasts. And don't forget, we're now on YouTube, so be sure to leave us a rating and a review. To learn more about this episode, from show notes to references, visit us at fasttalklabs.com. And to join the conversation on our forum, go to forums.fasttalklabs.com. For Angelo Poli and Trevor Connor, I'm Chris Case. Thanks for listening.